Hello, everyone. It's Michelle Carter, Director of the Aram Public Library, and today we are here with the UW Extension Office, Walworth County Master Gardeners. We're about to put a little bit of sunshine in your rainy day. And today's topic with Julie is composting, which is something I don't know if you do, but we have recently discovered it, and it really does work. And so Julie's going to give us lots of tips and information about it. Take it away, Julie.
Thank you, Michelle. Happy to be here. Happy Friday, everybody. I know it's September 11th, which means a lot of things for a lot of people. So, taking a moment just to recognize what day it is and remembering everything that happened on September 11th is always a good thing to do. I know I've been thinking a lot about that today. I am going to talk about gardening stuff here. So I'll share my screen to show you a few slides and a little presentation. So first I want to thank you, Michelle and Aram Library, for hosting this program every week. Because of COVID, we kind of just moved everything virtual, right? Everybody's really familiar with that now. So in an effort to kind of keep answering gardening questions, which is part of my job and part of the jobs of our Master Gardener volunteers, we wanted to kind of create this platform. So even if you're not viewing this program live, go to Aram Library's Facebook page and look at all of our past programs. We've been doing it every Friday throughout the season, throughout the summer, and there's lots of good information on all sorts of different topics. So again, my name is Julie. I'm with the University of Wisconsin Division of Extension. I'm a horticulture outreach specialist for Walworth and Rock counties. And like I said, it's really my job to help answer your gardening questions, also to help provide some educational resources and connect you with the resources that university provides. University of Wisconsin has tons and tons and tons of information, especially about gardening, especially about stuff in your yards, about lawns, all this really good, credible information. I can't stress that enough, is that the information that I really try to provide you and that our Master Gardener volunteers provide you is reliable and credible, so that you know that you're getting good, solid information. I don't have any volunteers with me today, but normally we do have a few volunteers that help out give these programs. Our Master Gardener volunteers do go through a certification process. So they do go through some training in order to be a volunteer for Extension. And they also fulfill certification requirements with volunteer service and continuing education. So you might see different volunteer projects out in your local communities. There's lots of different ways that they volunteer. Sometimes you might see them even at a presentation. In last year, we were at the Walworth County Fair, things like that. So hopefully after COVID settles down, we can start doing more of those types of things. But for now, we've been doing a lot of virtual programming. So first of all, we're going to talk about compost. I really just want to touch on, well, what is compost? So really, compost is kind of the end result of this composting process. So compost itself is a really rich organic soil, and it's what you do to add to existing soil. And that contains the nutrients essential for plant growth. So there's a lot of nutrients when you add this compost material to your soil. It's a great soil amendment. It helps not only add nutrients, but it helps with drainage in your soil. So for example, I know that I have pretty heavy clay soil. When we first bought our house about 7 years ago and planted a garden, I could barely put a shovel into the garden. I swear to you, it was just solid clay. So after years of kind of, planting and working the soil and adding compost, it's getting much better. So that really helps improve drainage. It helps add those nutrients. Organic matter is really important for soil composition. So it adds that organic matter. So the process of composting is the decomposition. It's a biological decomposition of organic waste. So things like your food and your food scraps. But there's organisms, there's living organisms in that compost that help break all that stuff down. There's a whole mix of organisms in there. So it might be little bacteria that we can't see, but you might be familiar with like worms, or you'll see other insects. Once you get composting, there's all sorts of insects in there. It's kind of fun to find them and see what's in there. And we want to have oxygen in there. So they're breaking that down in the presence of oxygen. And then the end result of composting is that accumulation of this kind of decayed organic matter called humus, or the compost. So first of all, why should you even think about composting? Well, one, it's a great way to reduce food scraps and other yard waste just from going to the landfill. If you are thinking about like all those orange peels and banana peels and eggshells and even the eggshell cartons and all that stuff, that could be going into the compost rather than the landfill. And we all know that landfills, they don't really break down very much in landfill. As I said, it's an excellent way to help improve your soil's health. It's going to supply that organic matter. It's going to help give the soil more nutrients for plants to grow. It's going to improve the soil moisture retention. So the soil will hold moisture better, but it also allow it to drain. And we haven't talked much about soil through these programs, but soil has a structure. It needs to have some space in there. You don't want heavily compacted soil. Roots need to have some space and some area to get the moisture, to get air and things like that under the ground. And then improves the fertility. It helps provide nutrients to the plants. So let's get into some top 5 things to help you start composting at home, or if you're already composting, just things maybe that you can even think about doing better. So I put this at number 1 because if you haven't started a compost, or maybe you're doing one but it's not going so well, is think about where you have that compost and really choosing a convenient site. So if you have a very large yard and you put that compost way out in the back, that might be fine, but are you willing to walk your food scraps from your kitchen out to that spot every day or every other day? So again, just thinking about it being convenient. Can you get to it? Yes, you want it out of the way, but you want to have it in a practical and convenient site. It's good if it can get about maybe 4 to 6 hours of sun, but it's not totally required. It will build some heat in there as it's composting, but if it can get some sunlight, that's great. If you look on Google or on Pinterest, you will see a gazillion different ways to build your own compost bin. So my recommendation here, it doesn't have to be something fancy, but you can certainly buy something pre-made or you can make something at home. The one that I have, we just had some old pallets laying around, so it sort of looks like the one on the left here, although not quite that good. Mine's a little bit more, the pallets were sort of broken and we just sort of pieced them together, but the concept is there to give it some sort of kind of container to put the materials in and that you can get at it. The other thing about being practical and convenient is you're going to need to get in there with a shovel and a pitchfork or something like that to turn it. So you can get ones that are in a barrel that you can spin and turn. There's lots of different designs. Again, don't make it complicated. There's things you can buy or make at home. I encourage you, a lot of DIY stuff on that online. Lots of great ideas there. Just do something that works for your yard. So as I said, there's things in there, there's living things in that compost pile, microorganisms that are feeding on the stuff you put in there for energy. So the system needs to be in balance for those organisms to be productive, because what they're doing is they're decomposing those things to give us that good, rich compost at the end. So what we like to say is you want 2 parts brown and 1 part green. Okay, so what does that mean? The 2 parts brown materials are things like your dry leaves, your maybe some small twigs. If you put too big of twigs or branches in there, they're not going to break down. If you can chip them, or if you have, a way to break them down or just break them down, that's fine. Sawdust you can put in there. I put my egg cartons, I rip them up in like paper towel tubes and toilet paper tubes. You can rip them up and put them in there. You can use straw. So those are your brown materials. Those are the dry materials. And what those do is they provide energy, they help absorb moisture, and they give some kind of structure to your pile. And it helps facilitate airflow because, again, those bugs and insects and fungus and bacteria that are all living in there, breaking that good stuff down, they need air. They need oxygen too. Okay, so 2 parts brown materials, then 1 part green. So your green materials are green usually. They're the wet materials. They're going to help provide nutrients and moisture. So fruit and vegetable scraps are fantastic. Eggshells, your coffee grounds are great to go in the compost. Grass clippings are great as long as they're untreated. If you've been treating with herbicides or pesticides, we don't want that to go in the compost because that can persist in there. Any plants, like, I'm starting to kind of clean out some plants that have passed on or cleaning out some containers, those can go in there, or leftover plants or things like that. So 2 parts brown, 1 part green. You want your compost to be in balance. Number 3, there's a big stop sign there because there's some things you don't want to put in your compost pile. That's really important too. So any plant materials that you are treating with any types of sprays, pesticides, herbicides, something like that. Some of those are persistent and they can survive the whole process. And then when you use that compost for planting or for putting around plants or somewhere in your yard, you could damage something that you're trying to grow. If you're pulling up lots of crabgrass and quackgrass and maybe other persistent weeds, those don't really go well in the compost either, because you're trying to create that nice humus. You're trying to create that to add to your soil. So if you think about anything you put in there, like these really persistent weeds, and then you use that compost as an addition to your soil, you can keep spreading those weeds around. So that's not really ideal. Definitely avoid any like meat or food scraps that have meat or have dairy, no cheese, nothing like that. You don't want to put that in the compost. You can't put your cat and dog waste in there. Try not to put diseased plants. If you know you had some plants that suffered a disease this year, don't put those in the compost. Try to burn them if you can, depending on where you live, or bury those if you know you're dealing with a disease. And any sort of treated lumber or sawdust, avoid putting that. Again, same reason, you don't want any chemicals in that compost pile because they can stay in there and then they'll harm the things you're trying to grow when you use your compost in your yard or garden. So here's a really nice graphic. I'm going to put the link to this resource into the comments. It's a courtesy of the UW-Madison Division of Extension Learning Store. If you just Google UW Extension Learning Store, you'll get to this site where they have publications on all sorts of different things. And they have a whole lawn and garden section. You can type in a keyword like compost and it will bring you up everything that has related to compost. This is one document that's making and using compost in the garden. It's a great resource. It has lots of information. The great thing about the learning store is you can purchase things. It will give a little thing to say to purchase the publication, or you can view it and you can just view it on your computer and download it at home. So you don't have to buy the publication unless you wanted to. So this goes through really what are the brown materials. Remember, 2 parts brown, 1 part green, and the section of do not compost. So your brown materials, those dry leaves. I know it's been wet all week here, but coming into fall, as you're raking up those leaves, that will be really good. Any sort of shredded cardboard, great. If you have some leftover straw, shredded newspaper, things like that. Again, break down any big twigs or branches. We want to have those pretty small to go in there so they can break down. 1 part green or green leaves and grass clippings as long as they're untreated. You can put weeds in there, especially if they haven't gone to seed yet. So just be careful. Coffee grounds, fruit, vegetable scraps, eggshells, great. Okay, so your compost does need to be maintained. It just needs a little bit of maintenance. You don't have to give it too much attention, but to be really successful, you need to give it a little bit. So when we don't have a week of rain, give it a little bit of water. A really good tip that I just learned was I have a bucket in my kitchen for where I put my food scraps. So it's just about a gallon size, like ice cream bucket. I put food scraps in there and then I can take that out to the compost and just dump it. What you can do is just give that bucket a little shot of water so that you can water your pile every once in a while. Or when you're going out, if you need to go water those container plants or water something in your yard, give your compost a little spritz of water too. So we want the pile to stay damp. Again, no problem this week, but in those times when we've been dry, you need to give it a little bit of moisture. This is where I need to go out to my pile and do some turning and get that pitchfork out and turning. I have been honestly kind of avoiding it. I was telling Michelle because of the yellow jackets have been kind of feasting over there when it was real warm out. So I've been kind of waiting to turn it, but turning is really important too. If you can do it once a week, just make sure you get out there and do it once in a while. It's going to help get everything moved around, get that moisture moved around, get the actual food scraps moved around. And it helps with the temperature. We want the compost pile to get to a higher temperature. That's going to help kill any weed seeds. It's going to help kill any disease causing things on our plants. It's going to decompose much faster. So even if it doesn't get super hot, that's fine. It's just going to go through a slower process. And number 5 is, a lot of times people think, oh, compost is like this stinky thing. And really, if you're doing it right, it's not smelly. So if it is smelly, that's usually just something that we can fix. So if it might be that there's not enough air circulation, so you might need to do some more turning, or you might just need to add some like dry leaves or some shredded paper or something. If it's going too slow, if you just feel like, wow, my compost pile is not doing anything, it might just need some more water and again, mixing up the pile. If the pile is too wet and warm only in the center, and it just might be too small, you might just need to make it a little bit bigger so that it has some stuff to work with. And then again, you can be on the other side where you need more green material. Maybe you just put a lot of that brown material in there, a lot of like sticks or straw and leaves, but you didn't really put much wet or green material in there. So we need some more fresh lawn clippings and food scraps or eggshells or something like that. Here's a funny comic that says he has his nose plugged and he's walking by the compost and he's, thinking that's going to be really gross. And then he goes, you could have just told me that compost smells like nothing. And that's true, because really a good working compost that's in balance isn't going to smell. When it gets stinky, those problems are really easy to fix. And I know Michelle was sharing with me before the program that she has a compost and actually has been growing pumpkins out of it. And this beautiful pumpkin plant started growing. I know my compost pile tomato plant popped up. So sometimes you get these surprise plants too, just growing. And so she's getting these really beautiful pumpkins out of it. So that's kind of a bonus for the summer. So I will share lots of resources in the comments as always. I'd love to hear from you. So I'll post a link to a survey, but even if you just have questions, just email me. I'll put my email address in the comments and you can email me directly. Any questions about your yard or garden or plants that you're growing, anything like that, let me know. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. I must say, we didn't quite know what that plant was, and pretty soon it was curving around and growing into the yard. But we were thrilled to find the pumpkins and we're pretty excited about harvesting them, which is my next question. How do I know when to harvest the pumpkins? 'Cause they're pretty big and they're pretty orange.
Are they pretty orange right now?
Yeah.
I would say, if they're pretty orange and they kind of can come off the stem pretty easily, I would say they're ready. If you kind of can twist them off the stem, I think that's when they're ready. I know similarly with squash, I was trying my butternut squash I have growing like last week and I kind of gave it a tug. I'm like, oh, I don't think it's ready yet, just because it was really hard to get off the stem. So I just let it be. And I think color is a good indication too. If sounds like they're just kind of regular pumpkins. There could be different types of gourds and pumpkins out there in squash, but
they look like.
Sometimes you don't really, if it just kind of randomly came up, you might not know for sure, but I would, if you think they're ready, then give it a try.
All right, I will do that. Thank you. So thanks everybody for joining us once again. We'll be back next week for more gardening knowledge, and take care today. And as Julie said, remember 9/11. Thank you everyone, and take care, stay dry.
Thank you.
And we'll talk to you later.